Hi, welcome to another weekly news about the Azure uh, and another podcast on Azure Centric. As usual, we would like to start our podcast, our weekly podcast, to thank you, in this case, for all your support. To don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to just basically tell us what you like and don't like, and just be able to just be here with my good friend Andrew. It's our weekly highlight. I'm looking
It
forward
is.
to this all the time. I know that sounds repetitive every single week, but for us it's really our. We even match today. This is not intentional. I just
We
want to
didn't
say
coordinate. It was just by chance.
by
It's
chance.
fantastic. I love it.
Exactly.
See, great minds think alike, right?
Exactly that, and exactly that. So yeah, so we have a very good plan for today. We are at the end of January, so it's been a good week, at least regarding work. A lot of good things, and apparently on Azure side of it, it's been another good week. So we have a fully good agenda for today, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of really good things that have been coming out. I know I'm waiting to hear for a few of the updates. I really want to hear some of the details from your view, and that's going to be really exciting. I mean, I know I think that about that every week, but it really is true.
Yes.
It does kind of keep me going,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, so there was a lot of really good updates that came out this week, and we actually did once again have to cut a couple of
Yes.
really good things.
Yeah.
So one of the things maybe we should do is encourage people to also go to the Microsoft blog sites
Yeah.
and don't just trust us to read you everything. We don't read everything top to bottom. We can't. We'd be a 6 hour podcast if we did that.
Yes.
And I don't have enough
And it's
coffee.
not and it's not the purpose of this podcast that we are doing.
Oh, that's right.
What we are doing
Yeah.
is we are basically comment what Microsoft did on the past week, and usually we are concentrated from Saturday to Friday, and the reason of this is we are recording this on Fridays, and sometimes depending on our agenda during the weekend as well.
That's right.
So we try to just cover the last week, and we always did since the beginning of the podcast. So the idea over here is to cover a week of updates, because sometimes we have a little bit more and we can go deeper on some of those announcements and some of those updates. Other times
Exactly.
we can't to do that, and just bear with us, because it's really difficult to for us to just doing like, we don't mind to do like a 3 hour podcast, but then I don't think you guys will appreciate that.
I think if we were going to do 3 hours, I'd like to see some actual demos and hands-on stuff, and that's
Yeah.
maybe outside of the scope of weekly news.
Yeah.
But we do have other podcasts that we both do, sometimes together, sometimes different ones, and they do have other content. I know you publish some really great learning
Yeah.
videos through your YouTube channel. And the reason I say that, I'm not here to advertise your channel,
But
but
thank you for
in
the
a
shameless
way, a
plug.
little, maybe a bit, right?
So
But
if we're
it's
talking
it's
about plug, let me press my awesome button, and don't forget to subscribe. I love this button, my friend. It's like,
It's true. Yeah. So, but you have some good learning
yes.
videos, and not the least of which is fundamentals. And I know that there's a lot of material out there on fundamentals level exams, especially for AZ 900 in Azure. But I like yours, and I'm probably not impartial here. Maybe I should disclose.
And
I might be too close to the source here, folks. But it's a really good getting started, and you have some in a series. And I think it's really good. I think it's worth mentioning.
yeah.
It's worth telling people that it's there. So if you have a friend, a coworker, it's really good for people, not even just in Azure for the first time, but new admins, right?
Yes.
So junior sysadmins and things like that, you go through and the way you explain things, it makes it easy to understand.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that you and I have kind of the foundation of our working relationship on, was you really explained things that I didn't understand in a way that I did. And, we both know I learn a little bit differently. And you were able somehow to communicate kind of cloud information and kind of transmit the cloud knowledge over to me, right? So,
Yeah.
all I'm saying, folks, is it's worth your time. Go over, spend an hour of your Sunday afternoon or something, drink a coffee, drink a beer, or whatever, and just enjoy some Marcos Nogueira at his very best when he's teaching us about stuff in the cloud.
Thank you.
Enough said.
That's a very good feedback, and thank you for that. And I have to say that they are asking us to just doing about certification as well. It's been one of most successful podcasts that we've been doing. I think we are overdue with that part. Probably we can do a special one about the new certification that are coming and all of that. We should.
So there was a new one that hit public release.
Yes.
That we haven't talked about this yet, but the 140 Windows Virtual Desktop certification, freaking cool, right?
Yeah.
Like, how timely is this in our current world with the pandemic and everything, and everybody's going all these directions, not just because of pandemic, but if you're in a different country right now other than Canada, and you're Canadian, it's going to be pretty tough to come home now. So you're going to have resources to work from where you are.
Exactly.
So if you didn't have those already in place, then you're going to need to get some hustle in and get moving on that. So WVD, what a way to go. And now, with such a good, strong product, Microsoft has issued a standalone expert level certification. So it's important to note. I don't know the full details on it. I don't know if they've published like the prerequisite requirements and things. Do you need like a 104 or something to qualify before you take it, or
on
what
top
the
of
deal
my
is?
head, I don't know. I have to consult that part.
Yeah, so maybe we should put that in the certification
Absolutely.
special. That would be smart, right? Yeah. But that's exciting news too, not necessarily related to Azure news, but kind of it's an Azure certification.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a lot going on in the Azure world. Not just kind of product and service related, right? Absolutely. Like there's a lot of support from worldwide learning. There's a lot of support from the whole product teams with Azure in general. I know there's many product teams. So there's a lot of things happening to make all of these updates and all of these changes come through, but then also to teach us about the products and services so that we can deliver them really, really well to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump to the first one. Generically available copy blob support over private endpoints in Azure Storage. This year we're starting with a very good one, at least for me, because now this allows you, first of all, to just copy from storage account to storage account.
Exactly.
That is the first thing that I like about this. So you can copy, and you can copy with the copy blob, or even our old friend AZ Copy.
AZ Copy, that's right. So this has been a challenge up until now,
Yes.
right? It's been difficult, not impossible, but you had to kind of be creative with your tooling to get information between storage accounts.
Yeah.
Now, generally available, you can actually do the copy blob, or you can use AZ Copy, which means, of course, command line automation, right? So now we can schedule things to move between accounts.
And the important part over here is, if you're doing this, usually you are, the storage account is a public service, is what they call, in this case, the service, right? Is the service that you have, and usually you're going not through your internal VNet or internal network. In this case, you are able to do that, achieving internal. But the good thing about this update is you can either have one private, for example, endpoint. You can copy between private endpoints, or you can copy between a private endpoint and a public one, in this case.
That's right.
And the thing that this does is allows you to use your VNet with secure data if you want to copy between those, but it automatically sees that you are using where is the source, where is the destination, and if you have permission on both. It's not because it's
That's
a
right.
private endpoint that you are using for a service endpoint, right? That you need to have permission. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So the fact that it validates both the source and destination permissions as part of the, before you're allowed to copy it, that's a big deal because instead of getting an error, it just simply says you don't have permission, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a nice one because now you can incorporate that into scripting, for example, and build those nice repetitive copies. And you touched on something, I think, lightly that we should highlight, which was that you can keep secure data encrypted
Yeah.
while you move this. And that's kind of a big deal, right? We've talked a lot about secure computing on this podcast, and we've talked about kind of the verticals with finance and healthcare and retail.
Yeah.
So generally, those sectors have bigger requirements in general for encryption and privacy standards, and I think that it's really cool that we're able to now securely move that data around. Like really good stuff. Yeah. Small update once again, right? But inside it is hiding a whole bunch of really cool little tidbits.
Exactly. The next one, it's kind of we had to do this. It's kind of way that Microsoft announced this, and it just didn't announce. It's another announcement incorporated on this blog post that they are talking about building the regionally resilient cloud service using Azure Resource Manager. So in this case, it's a tremendous blog post that tells us a lot of good information. It's one of the pillars of the well-architectured framework
Exactly.
that we have on Azure is building the resilience. It's like you mentioned on the videos that I did produce on Azure Foundations. It's talking about you should design, you should architect your solution for failures. It's not because it's on Azure that you should not predict now or not configure or not design for failures, right? And this talks about that. But it goes deeply. That talks about what you can do on inside the region. Because sometimes we talk about resilience, and we have these concepts because this is new. Was starting to be announced on the last Ignite. Okay, the resilience in this case, or the increase of features regarding the resilience within the region. So meaning that the availability zones and all of that. And now we have this on the cloud services as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So when we think of resiliency, often what comes to mind is globally redundant things, right? So we talk about availability groups going cross-region. We talk about globally redundant storage accounts. So there's lots of things that we think of at a very high scale, right?
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about this at length just between the two of us before, just to get our brains kind of working on thinking and really orienting ourselves to build our solutions with redundancy in mind. But we talk about things like the availability sets, and that's really what's coming in here, right? So availability sets, scale sets, and they talk in here virtual machine scale sets.
Yes.
App service, Azure Kubernetes service as well, of course. And I think we're going to give the honorable mention to the Azure Service Fabric, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot to this, right? It's not just as simple as just mentioning it and then it happens. This has to be integrated into the architecture, the planning. It needs to make it into your Visio documents. It needs to make it through your business process. And it should be, and I want to say should, because it's not always a have to. It doesn't always have to be part of it, but any systems that are of a classification where you need uptime and availability, we should be thinking of every possible way to add redundancies to it. And that's a big part of the well-architected framework, right?
Yes.
And Microsoft and Azure, specifically in this case, has a lot of really great guidance in this area. So this is more support for that, right? Moving towards better resiliency. Yeah,
absolutely. And this goes on the way that we've been talking on this podcast, and you can see a lot of good information about that. That is building that resilience. Resilience means that you are tolerant to failures. It's different than high availability, because it's although they can complement each other, they are not the same. Okay, because the resilience is you are resilient to failures. You have to have a failure in this case. The high availability, is the way that you respond to that failure. Resilience it's a little bit more than that. You can go down, but you are coming back without, for example, losing data, losing all of that. But exactly. Could be a manual process. Usually high availability, we are talking about an automated process that if there is a fail, we are leveraging, in this case, other service, or we are basically coming on that service that probably the end user will never notice that the server went down. Resilience,
and that's the good thing,
yes,
right?
Exactly. And it's mentioning talking about this, but there is inside of this post one mention that we didn't talk it, because we are going to mention right now. That is the new Azure Cloud Service deployment model that is in public preview. Okay, and this is the first in this case update with public preview. So remember, production, it's not for this. Okay,
that's right. So I actually had this conversation this week with one of my clients, and it never ceases to amaze me that this continues to be a blind spot for really, really knowledgeable, well-experienced professionals. But I think that it's okay, because we're all still learning.
Absolutely.
So it's important, and I want to run through this. I know we beat this poor thing really right into the ground, and I apologize if you are a repeat listener, but I'm sorry. Preview items go through a process, and it includes debugging. It includes testing things that might not work in production. There's no guarantees, and if something goes sideways on you, there's no Microsoft support for whatever you've done using a preview product. Yeah. And that includes anything it touches.
And so there is other thing. There is no SLA. So if the service come down, it come down.
It's just too bad.
It's
in preview.
It's just like Microsoft will start to be Canadian and say, "I'm sorry."
Well, they do. Yeah, they're very polite. I have to agree. So kudos to Microsoft Azure support. Exactly. I've never had negative experience, actually. For the many dozens of times I've submitted tickets for weird things over the years.
Absolutely. Although
I love when you put a ticket in and then they tell you that, no, we just moved that. It's in a different spot on the blade now. Oh, okay. Then
thank you.
But there is a preview process, right? So it's private preview, then to public preview for a wider scope of testing.
Yeah.
And then when everything meets all the very difficult requirements of being a general availability, then Microsoft releases it to general availability, right?
But yes, exactly. That's exactly that. But in this case, what I like about this deployment model is this is about Azure Cloud Services. Okay, so now what they're introducing this deployment model is what's called extended support. I know that name is not one of the best things that Microsoft usually does in this case, but what they are doing is the way that you are deploying this is used to be the way that you're doing with ARM and with Azure Service Manager, the ASM, the old one. Okay,
The older one. That's right.
older one. This one is using ARM, is leveraging the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so that's the big change. Is I think is one of the service that was left in this case on the new ARM and was still on the other one. So you will see that right now you will see the Azure Cloud Service as a classic, and now you will see Azure Cloud Services Extended Support. So that's a very good news because now you can base your deployment on Azure Cloud Services Extended Support. Although there are a few things that I want to mention here, that there are a few things that doesn't change. Okay, so you don't need to panic right now because ASM, I know that is the version 1, like I like to call it, of Azure, and R or ARM is the version 2 that I like to call it personally. But there are a few things that it doesn't change. So the code, the defined configuration and deployment is not changing.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, only the control plane has changed,
Exactly.
right? So the runtime has not changed. So it's not going to. They're saying at least it's not going to break existing deployment.
Exactly.
Right?
And the components of the cloud service definition, for example, the service config and the service package will not change. So in this case, the .cs def, the .cs conf and the .cs packed, it doesn't change. So it will maintain exactly the same regarding these Azure Cloud Services. The Azure Guest OS will maintain the same. Okay, so there are a few things that I highly recommend you to just going on that. So this is a very good announcement that they are doing. It's in public preview, but it's a good announcement so we can move forward in this case on the Azure Cloud Services. So I highly recommend you starting to see that in your environment, play with, and remember this is in public preview. So you have to remember that when becomes general availability, and we will cover this on our podcast, you probably have to redeploy everything. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. But it's a big risk with preview to GA, right?
It is.
Especially when we're talking about deployment tools themselves, like Resource Manager, of course, is very integrated into that. And one of the things I did notice in there is that they're really trying to keep a very big emphasis on stability of existing deployments and already deployed code.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good because I know you and I both have imparted that passion to a lot of our clients about ARM and using the JSON templates to build their deployments in a very repeatable and consistent fashion. So I'm looking forward to that.
I almost forgot about this because one of the benefits of this is the ARM capabilities of the role-based access control, so that you gain with these Azure Cloud Services. That you are limited on the version 1 that is the Azure Service Manager in this case, because that is one of the benefits of going ARM. But moving on to the next updates, now we have the general availability of Azure HDInsight, extend capabilities for encryption data in transit and at rest. It's a mouthful. I'm really happy. I'm really happy, not happy. I'm really happy that I was able to say that without coughing.
Yeah, it's a big one. Now I kind of want an apple a little bit. I'm feeling hungry, but that's okay. That's fine.
We'll have as many apples as we want after this.
You know what? That is one thing I do miss about Southern Ontario is the fresh Niagara apples.
Wow,
I'm going to be honest about that. Very juicy, very good apples. Anyways, moving on before this ends up about a menu discussion.
Yeah, this is an Azure Weekly News podcast. Just to remind you,
apples,
if we
that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we are talking about the fruit of apples there, just to be very clear.
Exactly. Yeah, not the
So yeah,
California
so
southern
yeah,
apple.
so Azure HDInsight extending for their encryption, really important, right? So a lot of the data at rest has had a very big emphasis, but now we're talking about data in transit here too,
Exactly.
and that's critical. So we kind of mentioned a little earlier about a wee tool called AZ Copy, right? And now we have ability to travel travel the data. Wow, copy the data between storage accounts. Can you tell what is on my mind right
Exactly.
now? I'm frustrated with not being able to travel, and I apologize for that.
That's okay, my friend.
So,
What I like about this update is, and we already starting talking a few updates ago, and it's being on the podcast a lot, is these custom management keys. So the possibility of, and we're starting to see a lot of service that you have what's called the environment, not environment. What's the name? It's not it's the Azure management keys in this case that you can produce inside of Azure. But we're starting to see the leverage of bringing from on-prem our keys, in this case, our customer management keys, to encrypt all of those services. It's been a
exactly.
constantly in the podcast, and it's been because Azure is being on that way. So if you have a solution that you're starting to have a lot of investment on your HSM solution, now you can bring your that keys to manage. But you need to be careful because if you lose those keys, that you lose the service as well, right?
Yeah, so that's important to note, right? So you need to maybe we can kind of crumble together a few of the things we've talked about even just today.
Yeah.
Uh, so we want to build for resiliency,
Yes.
right? So we want to have a backup of our encryption keys.
Yeah.
You need to appropriately secure that 100%. So you can, one of the big advantages of using the Microsoft managed keys is that they do have their backups. And if something happens in the infrastructure, they're able to help restore, effectively decrypt your data so you can operate.
Yeah.
So that's pretty important.
It is.
But that said, when you build your own structure, you bring your own keys. Very important to make sure you're using services like Key Vault and that you're keeping a backup copy of your keys available so that you can restore it should something happen. So, we refer to these in different ways to make them sound softer, challenges, a little hiccup along the road, all that kind of thing. But really what it means is your data is now encrypted and you have no access to it. And that's the whole purpose of the system. So yeah, make sure backup, and test restore.
Yeah.
So just our little maybe preach that's different.
We almost forgot to mention one thing, that you mentioned the data in transit, but this data in transit encryption is through IPsec.
Yes.
And that's the part that allows you to move back and forward with all of those, with all of that security in this case regarding this, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So it uses a secure tunnel, IPsec, to be able to move the data, and that allows it to stay encrypted during transit. So that is really important. That's a very good point.
Yeah. So moving to the next one, Azure Data Factory is now available in 2 additional regions. So good news for the ones that they want to have some kind of or to use Azure Data Factory. Now it's moving to China North 2 and South India. So now it's going to be available. And this is pretty big for them because now they can leverage all of that process of easily construct the ETL and the ELT in this case, process in this case with code free, that Azure Data Factory allows you. And it's pretty powerful in this case, right?
It's really powerful. So As you know, in a previous lifetime, I did a lot of SQL work, a lot of database work, and SSIS integration with the Data Factory is bloody huge. That's a big deal. So you can build very large data packages. You can push a lot of the configurations, and the SQL Service Integration Service (SSIS). That runtime really powers a lot of very big applications to do all the things they do. So the different SQL components, the views, the reports, the forms, all those things that happen kind of side to side in SQL Server, those just come right forwards as part of the power of Data Factory. Really cool to see how some of the old school technology is evolving and modernizing and really enabling businesses to just see and actually make sense of the huge amounts of data. I think we were talking about this, you and I, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was on our podcast or we were just chatting, but it's so easy to collect the data now. It's difficult to make sense of it, though.
Yeah.
And this is one of the tools that businesses can use to help them kind of sort through and organize. Data Factory, just a massive product.
It is. And it's one of the things that I like about this, like you said, with this integration with the SSIS, because it's one of the things that I always advise, especially an organization that is starting new, building there, it's serverless. And this is a serverless data integration services. And that's the part that I like about this. Although with these two additional regions, now we can use even those regions as BCDR. So business continuity. Oh my God, you have to say it.
Continuity.
Yes.
And disaster recovery.
I apologize
That's right.
In this case, but
it's okay. We're hand in hand on the funny talk today. There's no problem.
It's going to be.
We're only recording audio and video.
Yeah, no one's gonna listen to this, so that's okay. We are okay with that.
So long story short, we love Data Factory, and there's two new regions that we can use for business continuity and disaster recovery for geo redundancy in our data services.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I got all the words out there.
Oh my God, congratulations. Let's move to the new one. This is a very quick one. Python 3.9 is on Azure Functions. And
that's right.
Public preview. Don't forget about that. That's important. So
it is in preview, yeah. And as you know, I have a bit of a passion for Azure Functions. Lets me embed my nice little scripts that do all my problem solving in life for me. So.
And I'm leveraging Azure Functions way more than I used because I want to automate some of those manual process that I have. And I'm sometimes I'm switching between Power Apps, for example, and Azure Function because Azure Function it's more hard code, right? It's like it's like
and I think we talked about this a bit earlier, right? And we wanted to kind of share. We'll have to maybe get together.
I love both, by the way. Okay,
it's true. Yeah, like there's Power. I also use Power BI for a lot of stuff. As you know, I spend a lot of time, as do you, in kind of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And there's a lot of crossover between Azure as a day-to-day user with 365, right? So it's one of those things, and I know you always kind of try to educate me not to focus too much on those crossover areas, but it absolutely fascinates me.
Yes.
I get drawn in. So you know, as you know, Azure Functions is really cool, and the fact now has the flexibility to use Python 3.9, really awesome.
Yeah, it really is. So moving now to a very awesome topic. I'm really excited about this. Confluent Cloud integration with Azure is now GA, and this is a very nice topic because if you are familiar with Apache Kafka, okay, and Apache Kafka is a way that you can have batch processing on real-time event streaming. Basically, to resume that in a few words, it's what we're talking about, is having that on event streaming. And I was able to to one of my clients be able to work with this, and it's really powerful. Confluent is being one of the key players of the Apache Kafka in this case, building the clusters and everything else. But the cool about this is the Confluent Cloud, it's based on Azure. It's like the SAP cloud, right? It's based on Azure. And now we are seeing the integration of what they built or their cloud that is hosted on Azure. Now it's available for everyone to use it. So provisioning the Confluence Cloud, in this case, you can do it by Azure Portal, Azure CLI, fully managed infrastructure. So you don't need to go on another cloud to just managing that. You can provisioning to everything through the Azure portal. The single sign-on authentication, it's done through the Azure clients and using Azure Active Directory and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, I got you
on one of the points here. So I was actually reading about the SSO integration.
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm kind of staring at you there, but yeah. So one of the big improvements with this is the single sign-on from Azure to Confluent Cloud. So it gives you the ability to really leverage Azure AD identities, which means it gives you all of the roles and all of the things that you need to use proper RBAC. You can manage your users in your own environment and extend it in. So it is SSO. It's not SaaS integration. That's important. There's a bit of a difference there, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it's going to make it easy to provision people into that based on roles and into Confluent Cloud, I should say.
It is.
So it's going to be really good. And the other part, as you know, I have a bit of a excitement bone for billing problems and I don't want to say it, but cost management. I got it out. So, so you can get unified billing from Confluent Cloud Service through your Azure subscription.
Absolutely.
So because it's a separate entity, right? Like you were saying. So it's a Confluent Cloud. It's just built on top of Azure services, right? So, you know, we're using what they're using. They're using Azure. And now that Confluent Cloud billing, not only do you just get to log in, I want to say seamlessly with SSO, but you also can unify that billing in one spot. And that's really useful if you have a very good CSP agreement and you're getting a bit of a good rate, right? So we all know it's not just a flat rate for billing in Azure. There's different tiers. There's pay as you go. You can have all very complex agreements or very simple agreements. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of any agreement that's going to save the operation expenses a little bit. So if you can get 1% off, then that adds up over a year when you're at scale, right? Absolutely. Big time. So it's always worth asking. A really handsome, smart fella once told me, "How are you going to know, Andrew, if you don't ask?"
Exactly. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. You could not be more right in this case. But what I like about this is with the update or with the announcement, right, comes a very nice blog post that is on Azure blog that is talking about that seamless integration between both. And I highly recommend you going there to just see it because it talks about the quick provisioning of the Confluent Cloud resources within Azure ecosystem, the way that integrates the experience between the both clouds, right? And how you can get started with that. So the good thing about this integration is now it's available on the marketplace. So you don't need, in this case again, to go outside of your environment. It's another offering on Azure that they have available, and that's what I like about this. I was able to to work with this, and it's really powerful the way that the Apache Kafka works. It's really a nice set of tools that we can have, right?
Yeah, it's very powerful, right? And you correct yourself a little bit and say instead of play, you were working with. But I think we
No, I
both
did
know
play. I did play as well. I was
our
able
yeah,
to play with
our
this.
listeners know us pretty well by this time, I think.
Yes.
And we have a lot of fun with what we do. And though it is sometimes work, right? And we definitely work hard. We don't record until like Friday night, and you see behind us it's pretty dark out here. But
Yeah.
but that said, we really love what we do.
Absolutely.
And though it is work, it's not awful. It's not like grinding the axe or anything like that, right? It's something we love, and we have a passion. And I just want to emphasize that one of the reasons that we do actually get together every single week to make time to record is because we want to share that passion, and hopefully somebody will benefit from it. So
Yeah.
my theory: if one person benefits from something that we're doing, then we win, right? So
Absolutely.
everybody wins when that happens, and I love that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
here's a reminder: subscribe, go
Oops.
leave a comment. And
It
I
is.
surprised him, so he was slow.
You want again? It is again.
I love it. I'm so sorry. I know I'm distracting
Oh
off of
man,
the
that's
topics
okay.
here, but I just wanted to say that it's so fun to be able to share with everybody, and we really do
Yeah,
appreciate it. We love it.
absolutely. The next one of updates, it's now the South Central US availability
Mhm.
zones in Zone GA.
Yeah. So there's a big emphasis on better resiliency
Yeah, this week
for
I think
some
it's the
crazy
motto.
reason this week, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the theme of this week podcast is resilience, and we see a lot of those services regarding this, and this is another one. And again, this update was following one another good blog post on Azure blog that
Mhm.
this case the general manager and the COO of the US Cloud produced, the John Nisi, and I apologize if I murder your last name. Uh, yeah, it's sometimes it's difficult for
The
me.
word is mispronounced.
Yes, and I really, if you are listening, John, I really apologize. But the good thing is, I read your blog post. It's really good information
Mhm.
inside, talking about
It's awesome.
all of this resilience, especially in South Central US, is
That's right.
one of the most busiest regions that they have, that they add resilience. It
It
talks
is.
about good stuff about that.
Yeah, so one of the things, so we talk about availability zones, and I just want to touch on that for a minute, if it's okay,
Absolutely.
because availability zones is within a region. So a region is built on multiple data centers, and there's lots of top secret information. But on YouTube, you can see some Microsoft released videos, and I want to emphasize that Microsoft has released that publicly on YouTube. That's like very critical, I think. That they show the building of the data centers, and that they sometimes are many kilometers apart, or even more, right? So I know it's all top secret, so I don't ask a bunch of questions because I don't want to know. but within that zone, if you have, say, a localized power failure, or something happens like an evacuation, or they have to shut things down in a data center, an availability zone protects you. It can help your systems fail over to a different data center in the same region. So you're still in South Central US.
Yes.
You are just in a different physical data center,
Yeah.
but you will have no idea. And you never know what data center you're in, or how many there are, or any of that. It's very transparent
Yeah.
with all of the services, right?
It is, and we're starting to see a kind of a bit of shift in this case of the availability within the region, because let's talk, for example, from VM side of it. At the beginning, when we a few months ago, we starting to have we had two options for availability on the VM. Okay, so we had the possibility of availability zone, right, and the availability sets.
That's right.
So the availability set, and I did create. I know that I'm going to do another shameless plug, talking about availability of virtual machines. So go to see that video. That I talk about that because I think it's important to bring over here, especially to this update, because the availability set is the way that you can have your virtual machine, in this case, not being on the same host. So if you have, for example, a web browser, a web service, I apologize. If you have a web service, or if you have a farm of web service, you don't want all your web service to be hosted on the same, or to be placed on the same hosts, right? Hence, the domains, in this case, on the availability set, you have the possibility of choose domains and fault domains and so on and so forth. But now, depending on your region, and that's the important part that I want to bring over here, is depending on the region, you have the availability zone. So the availability zone means that now you can choose where you want to place that VM. And if you choose availability zone, okay, now that VM, it's not replicated to a different one. So now it's basically, if that zone becomes unavailable by any means, by a power failure, like you said, you have the other zones that now is being replicated and starting that resilience from the other ones as well. So even on and the good thing about that, it's not only disasters, it's, for example, updates, because Microsoft do maintenance and we have to take that in consideration as well. So I just want to bring that over here, that I went way more detail about this, because it's one of the things when I'm delivering workshops, there is a lot of confusion how I can do it, availability on virtual machines, for example.
That's right.
And this is one of the ways that you can do it. Although I just want to finish this part saying that regarding these availability zones is not available on every region. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, it is. It's only in selected regions, and if you're building a design, architecting something, use the product and feature availability finder, I think is what they call the tool.
Yeah.
And then you can go in and search based on the product or service and find what regions that is available in.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of part of how you support that well-architected framework and how you deliver something with good resilience and that's well built, really, for your clients or customers or even your own organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so it's very important to understand availability sets, availability zones, scale sets, and how everything works together to build some redundancy. So I love how you said, like, think about Windows updates. It's as simple as a machine needs to come offline to do updates and reboot, but your system requires 99.99% uptime.
Yeah.
So how do you accomplish that? Well, there's ways to do that.
And you have to remember that even on that we have SLAs, and the SLA usually allows to have a downtime, an unpredicted downtime, through, depending on SLA we're talking about, could be a time frame during the year. In this case, that's what SLA, or during the month, depending on the SLA they're talking about. But it's really good to know. And the next, in this case, update, it goes again on the resilience. So now, Germany West Central availability zones, it's GA. So we are not seeing only those big regions like the US, but we are seeing those local regions as the country ones, right? That they have availability zones as well. They are growing. Again, it goes exactly what I was talking about, that not all the regions that we have availability zones, but we are starting to see this. And it's very good that now Microsoft allows, in this case, for our German friends
Yep.
on West
Germany,
Central
West Central. Yeah.
to
Yeah. Well,
have
there's
availability
big
zones.
demand,
Yeah,
right? So you and I talk about it offline, but we've been hearing a lot of questions about availability sets, availability zones from regular companies, right?
yeah,
And they may not have access to these big resources in, say, a private data
yeah,
center. So an availability zone is really a really great reason to look at your IaaS or PaaS options in Azure,
yeah.
because the availability zones are kind of its own selling feature. Like, it's available, it's up. You
It
get
is.
an SLA of 99.99% with an availability zone. And I don't know if that's valid in every region that it offers, but check what it
It
is in
is.
your region that you're going to use the product in. And super awesome, right? Like, I don't know, I'm very excited about all the availability coming out this week. It just really speaks to how Azure has such an emphasis on good design and
Yeah,
high availability for
yeah.
every single customer.
Absolutely. And the thing about this is, for example, you may ask, but Germany, it's not, it's a big country in Europe, but why we have different regions? For example, if they can be close to each other, and that's the point that I want to bring in this case to this conversation is the way that Microsoft creates the regions is if they are under a latency, they became a availability zone within that region. If they are outside of that latency, they become a new region. That's why probably if you are wondering why we only have regions that only have one availability zone, is because of that. But there are other
Yeah.
regions that we have, for example, and that happens a lot in US specifically. Like you have, for example, the US East, and you have US East 2. So, but why we have those two happen exactly the same on West West and West West 2? Because the data
Yeah.
centers that you place, they are outside of that latency, so now becomes a region. And now the only option that you have is to create another region, and that give us as the customers the way that we can deploy. Because if our applications and our, for example, clients and all the users that are using that application are out of the east, makes totally sense. If I have, for example, my BCDR, that I will not say what it is, I have to ask you to do it, because I will not uh, spell it, or not
The downtime prevention letters.
exactly.
That's what.
Thank you. And allows them to just building like the BCDR of the solution very close, so the latency and the fastness of that response is going to be increased by using those. And sometimes you can have up to 6 data centers on that, basically that area, on the east, on the west side of US, for example, right? That's the part that I like about this. And talking about SLAs, moving on, using your that you are drinking your little bit of coffee. Uh, Now, this I think is really important, and I will let you I will let you introduce, because it's one of your favorite products.
It really is. So 99.99% uptime for Azure Active Directory Premium customers coming April 1st of this year. So this is in development,
Yeah.
right? And as Microsoft announced a little earlier, now coming for Azure AD is SLAs. So here we go.
An
Now,
increase of
previously,
SLA, I have to say.
yeah, premium
Yes,
SLA.
because it was 3 nines and now we have 4 nines.
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah. And what they're working on right now is they're going to promise 2 nines, right, for uptime for Azure AD user authentication and licensed Azure AD Premium customers. It's an improvement over their original of just 99.9%. So we all remember, I think it was November or December of this past year, they had what we're going to refer to as usual as a little hiccup. And there was a minor outage. Now, when we say a minor outage, it's not minor to those impacted in the outage, of course. So though, I'm sure there was a lot of people. I think there was a lot of European time zones impacted in this particular challenge. So this is really, I think, coming out of that. And I think it goes to show how the Azure teams really take when they have a challenge like that, something happens, that not only do they publicly dissect the problem and show, hey, listen, this is what happened. Yeah. This is what went wrong, and this is what we're going to do next time to prevent this from happening.
Absolutely.
But now look at how they go even further and start developing SLAs for the same product. Blows my mind, the commitment to excellence that's in here. We talk about data center, we talk about IT excellence, right? We talk about those things now in the industry, but look at how they're just leading by example. And I want to say Microsoft Azure is leading by example.
And this Active Directory is really important because this is your authentication. This is where you authenticate for everything you do. And I just want to bring one thing is, it's just 1.9, okay, that we are adding.
Oh my gosh.
But 99...
Come on, that 6 hours is absolutely critical if you were trying to close a business deal, right?
I just went on our friend, the best...
The Bing engine?
Yes, okay. That one. The Bing with the G, in this case. Our search engine. And, for example, 99, that's what we have right now. 99.9 allows Microsoft to have 8 hours, 45 minutes, and 56 seconds of downtime, okay, of unpredicted downtime through the year, okay. By adding 1.9, it goes down by 8 hours, 45 minutes, and whatever seconds to 52 minutes and 35 seconds.
So you imagine under 1 hour, 52 minutes and some seconds is all they're allowed to have for service interruption, right?
Unpredictable. So, and this is the part that I want to reinforce is it's unplanned, okay, downtime. So it doesn't consider like saying, hey, we are doing this change. We need to.
Yeah, and that's true. Okay, so I think the number of times there's been service interruption with Azure ED that I can think of is, I think, 3. And we're talking about across almost a decade, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a whole lot. Now, that said, when it goes down, like you said, this is our identity services. And this is where we have a lot of integrations now. And we have SSO incorporated to it. We have different products coming in using things like SAML authentication. So if you end up with like a product failure or downtime of some flavor, then people may not be able to log in and get things like email that's also integrated from 365 across AAD, right?
Absolutely.
So it's very impactful when there's outages. Now that said, I think it's really important that we focus on how they come out of those things. And this commitment of SLA is coming out on the tail end, albeit a couple of months later, from a problem,
Absolutely.
Right? So this is how they fix a problem. Yeah. Let's make it way better, and then let's make a promise that we're going to keep it way better.
And they reduced tremendously, like 8 hours and 45 minutes to 52 minutes a year. It's a huge improvement.
So let's think about that for just a moment, right? So we know that Azure Active Directory runs on top of Azure. So it actually runs on its own infrastructure within the Azure construct, right? And that means that they're using well architected foundations.
Framework.
Sorry for the crossover there, but it was not necessarily intended originally. But they're building Azure AD very well with redundancies, right? So they're using the same things that they're telling us we should also use, such as availability zones, scaling, availability sets, geographic redundancies. So they're building their own services kind of based on these same frameworks. And they're able to make this 2.9 commitment. That's really amazing to me. I think it's absolutely awesome.
It is. It is.
Super impressed.
Yeah, and the next one, it's really good. This update, it feels proud. The previous one with ID, it just blows my mind because talking about 400 million users monthly, right? And the decrease of SLA, it's big, but Azure Cognitive Services Translator in Inuktitut.
Inuktitut. So this is our northern Canadian friends in Nunavut. They may speak in Inuit, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Inuktitut.
Exactly. So now we have
I probably mispronounced it terribly.
So, and that's good because I always want to go to in this case to Nunavut, and I want to see that part of Canada, the north part of Canada, and now I can basically grab my Azure Cognitive Service Translator and speak with them on their language, or understand if they are kind of saying bad things about me, saying, look at this southern guy coming over here and he doesn't wear the good jacket because this is freezing cold.
We're both going to get an offside for that one, my friend.
and shows that especially for us Canadians, this is pretty good, and there is something between over here that this update doesn't mention, but it's already 70 language in this translator.
Yeah. I kind of saw that in the update, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't actually read this one until you went live with it there.
Okay.
Because I saw a services translator and I thought that's cool, and then I was like, oh wait a minute, that's not as easy to pronounce as I thought it might be.
Yes.
That was fun, but 70 languages, right? Like that's amazing.
It's impressive.
And I know, at Ignite and all these different events, you always see the translations in your own language setting. That's using the Azure Cognitive Services Translator, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you see that in the Teams meetings that are being broadcast from Microsoft events, they're using their own technology, right? They're eating their own food stuff there, and it's absolutely cool. So once again, leading by example.
Exactly. It is. The next one is resource instance rules for access to Azure Storage is now in public preview. Right? So what does that mean?
What? Well, it means I'm getting hungry actually, but I'm gonna be. I know
that we are at the end of the podcast. We have a few left, but in this case, some resources.
Sorry, I have a one-track mind.
Some of those resources cannot be isolated. In this case, on virtual networks, or in this case, IP address rules. But you want to restrict, in this case, the access to your storage account or to only all your applications that you want. So it's basically so restricting your Azure storage on the access that they should do it to whatever you want to do it, in this case, a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the resource you're restricting this to, though it's in preview, must be in the same tenant as your storage account. And that's really important for customers that use multiple tenants to separate their resources. this restrictive, like this security improvement really needs to be within the same tenant.
Yeah, good point. I was almost missing that part, but I'm glad that you bring it up to that. Moving moving to the next one is one of your favorites. It's been a while that we are not talking about this.
Yeah, it's been, I think, 2 or 3 podcasts. I felt like maybe we were all forgotten about over here in cost management land, but then I get surprised as usual, and here they've released already their January 2021 kind of monthly update, right? So there's a whole bunch of sub items in this one. And it's important to note, they're actually releasing this January update right at the end of January. So it's still in a January calendar month. And that means that things are turning over very quickly, and February is going to be very busy. So
yes, we are assuming that. But yeah, a lot of updates on the cost management and billing for January, and way that you can do it. There is new views for the resource groups. There is the cost management labs that is new in this case. There is some defined role responsibilities. There is a lot of good things about this update, and
there is.
And one of the last updates of this podcast is one of the coolest. I think we didn't leave this by on purpose. It's the release. We are following the release, okay? And this was the last release that Microsoft announced this week. Or this case, when you listen and sing this podcast last week, it was the last release. It's kind of confusing, right?
It was yesterday. For everybody else listening and viewing, it's going to be a few days ago or last week.
Or depending, if you sing this down the road, it could be a few years ago.
Oh, we're getting deep into a logic loop here. I can feel it happening.
But this one is automate application lifecycle management with GitHub Actions. So pretty cool, right?
Sounds like a G.I. Joe figure. I'm going to be honest now with improved chopping action.
It is completely.
I kid, but you've been taking advantage of a lot of GitHub services lately, and you've been working very closely with some projects on Kubernetes, and you're taking advantage of repositories on GitHub, and the whole lifecycle management is, first of all, anything with like software lifecycle management is really cool. That's one of the foundations I learned on the SDLC, and I think that, this is something that applies to a lot of people out there. This isn't just about developers using code from GitHub, right? So the whole DevOps movement has kind of gone in this really cool direction where it's just IT, right? So we're all using a lot of kind of dynamic deployment tools, and it doesn't mean we have to get code heavy. In fact, I think in this this release, they talk right in the middle of the screen there about what is low-code application development on Azure, right? So they want us, and I say they, the industry in general wants to have the ability to take advantage of dynamic services that are cloud-based, cloud-native services like GitHub and Kubernetes, and we want to be able to have regular people come in and use those, right? So we can't have, restrictive barriers in place. That means we have to learn languages and know like tons and tons of very specific information to write code. As you know, I used to do a lot of programming. I'm going to say back in the day. And I think that this is just fantastic. Like, I love watching, and I know there's a lot of younger people, even just starting high school or pre-high school, that are getting into this, and they're really coming through. And there's a lot of STEM programs. There's a lot of like women in code programs that are trying to draw in these areas that traditionally have been kind of at the edge, right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's really starting to
It is.
show. Like the benefits of all of this balance is starting to finally be visible for everybody, because look at how good these services are getting.
It
right?
is, and it's not only that. It's like you mentioned as well on this podcast, is the cross platform. In this case, they are
Yeah.
leveraging all of this to help developing with low code applications, leveraging the Power Platform, particularly
That's right.
in this case the Power Apps that we already mentioned here as well, curiously, right? And the thing is, you don't need to be a fully developer to just going on Power Apps. It's really simple to just go there. If you have the logic and you have the low code, that's where you gain most of it, because you can customize
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and that's what we're kind of talking about, right? Is especially in Power Apps, it's a lot of kind of drag and drop. It's objects,
Yes.
Like visual objects, I should say, right? So you can see what that object does. You drag it over, you reorder them, you can add customizations to it, but it's not the same as writing a program or writing code, but your outcome is the same as writing code, which is freaking awesome. It's really cool.
And inside of this release of this blog post, there is a tons of links to support documents that you can use. Even on Azure, in this case, the low code application development on Azure websites, for example, or even on APIs, or even on GitHub, or even on labs that you want to do it, the hands-on labs on source control and all of that. There is a ton. I highly recommend you to go and see this blog, because a blog post on Azure blog, because it's really, really good what they are doing. And again, this Ricardo Duncan, that is the product marketing manager, did an awesome job writing this blog post, because it really explains how they are improving on this. It's not an update, it's not regarding Azure, but I think it's an honorable mention how you can do this, right?
It is, yeah, and it's a really great one to close out kind of our little podcast on, right? Because all of those links that he included at the bottom of his article really take you to where you can really grow your knowledge, and not just through reading, but hands-on, right? Like all those labs that are linked to, really great, really great labs and materials.
I'm so glad that I'm not the only one.
So we had a couple struggles with some big fancy words, like really.
That's okay. we are just finishing our podcast, and I think it's a good way to finish in this case, to say thank you and bear with us. We've been a very heavy week of work. It's been awesome to be able to do so much thing on Azure, and I'm really happy. It's time to really finish our week, in this case, with this podcast, to thank you once again. I'm going to use my favorite button again, so get ready. 1, 2, 3,
okay,
and here we go. Subscribe. Help us out to just spread this content. Again, if you like it, give a thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment, or if you don't leave a comment, I leave that up to you. But help us out.
Yeah, we love hearing from everybody.
Exactly.
So feel free, right? Like just drop a note. Check out Azure Centric on Twitter as well, right? And there's lots of ways to provide a bit of feedback, but generally,
just follow us on Twitter. My Twitter is MD Twitter of the Andrew is
Azure Tracks.
Okay, so just follow the Twitter, or just follow our. You will find on the description of the podcast below all the links to social media. If you don't want to leave a comment, just find us on your best way. So I have to say thank you, Andrew, once more time. And
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I just love this opportunity.
that's okay. And see you next week.